Hi guys, it's JP from JP FIT4LIFE, and today I'm here with a brand new book podcast with a good friend of mine, Dom Vargas. We're going to be talking about two books that we've read in the past, and we try to read to grow as people. We try to increase our skills and learn about new things that we've never heard about, so we can gain that experience, even if it isn't firsthand. We can have a better idea when we encounter things in real life. We'll have that book to use as knowledge when those situations arrive. So Dom, how are you doing today?
Fantastic, JP. Long day of work, but who hasn't had a long day of work or school for those who are in school, finals week and all that. Otherwise, so far so good. Glad to be here as always.
It's always great to talk to you. And I know it is a stressful time of the year. And let's see, we're going to be talking about your book, Dom. I want to talk about your book first. So pitch anything. And for the first, actually, I want to talk about why did you start reading before we start talking about your actual book.
Yeah, wonderful. So, for me, growing up, my mom and dad, well, really dad, they were really heavy and keen on reading. I guess if I had to answer why they did that, they would always talk about how it's important to read, and it's important to not just read books that you'll like, but to go outside of your comfort zone and to read really any book. My dad would always preach not to just read for leisure because you enjoy it, but to read to, in a ways, expand your mind. So, of course, as a kid, I was like, whatever, dude. But in middle school, I really started to read a lot more, and I would literally go to the library and just pick off a book off the shelf, whether it was pink, green, black, blue, or yellow, and read it and finish it. And like, all right, cool, let's do another one. So I got enjoyment from reading because I guess at the time I was challenging myself to read. And, when you challenge yourself to do something and you complete it, you feel good about yourself. And so that just drove me to read so many books. I was literally a bookworm. I was a kid in class who would prop up the textbook and put in my book on the inside so I could read my book, but not the school textbook, because I love reading so much. And I was like, this textbook is boring. But you know what? This Odysseus and the Odyssey, Homer's the Odyssey. This isn't boring. This is awesome. So I was always really, really keen on reading. And what got me started is my parents always telling us to read books, expand our minds, and not just to read books you'll like.
And how did you find books that you really liked early on? Did you have a process that you went through when trying to find books?
So again, remember in the beginning stages of life, middle school, I would just pick random books. But then in high school, one day during Christmas, my aunt out in California sent us $100, for Amazon money. And I was like, you know what? I'm a junior at this rate in high school. Let me be a little more serious about life. Not that I wasn't at the time already. People always said I would be a great, businessman, or you're gonna do awesome stuff and be a politician one day. So I was like, I want to be a great leader in life. I really don't have a lot of leadership experiences in high school, so let me read a book about leadership. And so I literally went in on Amazon and typed in leadership, and of course, all the business leadership books came up. And so that's really what got me started, and that threw me into the self-development, personal development, personal finance, entrepreneurship, leadership, business, finance, all that stuff. That's how I got into that, because I got money from my aunt and I decided I really wanted to make a change and set myself up for that future success. So I typed in leadership on Amazon books, and boom, here we are today. Thousands of books, not thousands, but hundreds of books later. So that was my process.
You're gonna get to 1,000 books.
Oh yeah,
I can feel it.
Absolutely, we've got to. If we want to go where we're going, JP, we've got to, and you know that just as well as I do.
Definitely. I think that now that's a good segue into, so how did you choose Pitch Anything, the book? That's the book Dom's going to be talking about today, by Oren Clough. How did you pick that book, Dom?
So this one's a little bit fun, more fun about how did I pick it. I've got a lot of people who would always say, oh, you'd be great in sales. Oh, you would kill it in sales. Oh, you're a great salesperson. I don't think they really know what sales is, so that's why they would say it. They would just see that I could do well in public settings and interacting with others, so they would associate that with sales, and so they would say that. So naturally, I've connected with lots of salespeople over the years, over on LinkedIn now, and one of them, I just so happened to connect with me, and I told him, hey, I really like sales, yada, yada, yada. I asked him a question. We got a conversation going, and he was like, hey, if you really like sales, you should read Pitch Anything, because that book will change your sales game. Boom. So literally, because somebody on LinkedIn suggested the book to me, I ordered it and read it this summer, and it was great. That was how I picked it. Somebody suggested I read it who was in sales. And I figured, hey, they know what they're talking about. Let me read this book.
So what was the first point in the book that you felt like hooked? Like you felt that the knowledge was going to be valuable to what you wanted to accomplish after?
Mm. So for me, I got this book because the whole premise when you're looking on the outside is it's going to give you a systematic approach towards persuading people, towards presenting, and towards um, sealing the deal, if you will. Because the guy who wrote it is an investor, investment banking pitchman who has secured $1 million deals by simply showcasing what the deal can do for people. So he's not even doing like work in that sense. He's literally the guy who shows up. Sure, he spends a couple hours putting together a project in maybe a couple weeks, but at the end of the day, he's the pitch man. Honestly, I'd say he has probably one of the easier parts of the job because he's not putting together the financing and all that. He's just got to show them what the deal could do for them. And so for me, that's what really stuck is that you don't have to have the brains or the brawn to do it all. You just need to have a part in the picture of this work project or the deal to get it done. And that's the kind of the first thing that attracted me to the book and got me to keep reading it because I really liked his, again, systematic approach. And he uses a little bit of psychology that he's learned in it. And probably the first point of the book that he talks about that I like is that is the concept of the Croc Brain, and that you've got to get through that, or you got to know how to talk to it in order to get through to anybody. Because basically the premise of Croc Brain is that, hey, JP, I'm talking to you, and instantly your brain's going, all right, is this guy a threat? Is he going to hurt me? Is he going to steal from me? What is he going to do? Now, obviously, you know I'm not a threat because we've known each other. But in that very first instant, you're meeting somebody or people you don't know or important people you're walking by. That's kind of what we're thinking initially. So we're not even going into the logic part of our brain when we first meet somebody because instantly it's going friend or foe. Like we want to push them out or let them in kind of thing. And I like that's the first thing you kind of learn about in this book. And that's what I liked and kind of hooked me and kept me going. It's a great question, by the way.
That's definitely interesting. And I think what other things have you learned from the book? What were some of the other bigger pieces of advice that you got from the book?
So one of the biggest pieces of advice or the approach, I'll talk about the strong approach or method, however you want to look at it. It's his acronym for how you can really formulate what you want to show off, right? Or what you want to get done. And so strong is the acronym, and the S stands for setting the frame. And so this is probably the most important part about the book. He talks about framing. So there's the power frame, the time frame, some other frames I forget about, the social frame, yada, yada, yada. You get my point. Read the book to hear about all the frames. But basically, he talks about how in any situation, even in this one right now, we're just having a friendly conversation, we're using frames as we speak. Right now, I might be using the power frame because I'm wearing a collared shirt and you're wearing a jacket. So I might, have the edge up on you. You might have the power frame because you're asking me the questions and I'm doing all the talking, right? So that's kind of what he talks about in the book. And one of my favorite examples of the power frame that he uses is when he was in a meeting, right? And he says that in this particular meeting, he was meeting with probably like the CEO of his company, of the hedge fund or whatever, the guy with the money. Now, instead of it being a one-on-one meeting, which is easier, it was a one-on-one meeting plus that guy, he had two of his like assistants. And so the way that they did it was that they had one assistant on his left, one assistant on his right with the CEO in front of him. And he talked about how in the book, that's a tactic. That's like a shark in the water thing. They're like swimming around him. They've circled him. He's in their territory. It's not his show. Obviously, in order to get them to get to buy or to give him money or investment or capital, he's going to need them to be like, you know what? Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. This guy's got what we want. It's hard to do that when you're outnumbered. But he talked about how he stole or regained control of the power frame by doing this little trick. He said that basically through the meeting, he started to see signs of disinterest from the big guy, the money guy. Mm-hmm. The dude was leaning back at his desk, kicking his feet up. And he said what he did was he noticed the guy had an apple on his desk and he was about to start eating it. And so he said, hey, may I be excused? They're like, yeah, of course. He said he wanted to get some water. He said when he walked in the room, he saw that there was a kitchenette in this office. So he walked to the kitchen to get water. He grabbed a knife. When he got back to the desk, He grabbed the dude's apple that he was eating from his mouth. He grabbed it. He said, "May I?" He grabbed it. He cut it in half and told him, "When you work with me, everybody gets a piece of the pie. Here you go. Here's your half of the apple." And so I love that because that's ballsy. It's like, what the hell? Like, you just messed with this guy who had all the money. Like, you just took his apple and then cut it and then told him, "Yeah, this is what happens when you work with me." That's ballsy. I love that. And so I forget, that's probably not a good example of the power frame you talked about, but basically knowing how to use, the leverage in these social surroundings where you are technically the lesser man, and redistributing, as he talks about in the book, redistributing the power. So regaining it and then giving it back to them, even though they have it. It's theirs. I mean, it's their office, it's their building, it's their company. But you just went in there, you took this guy's apple, who's the biggest boss in the whole building, you cut it in front of them and said, "This is what happens when you work with me." And then you give it to him as if he had to earn that from you. So I love that. I love that. That's probably one of my favorite examples of framing in the entire book right there.
So how do you?
It's a long-winded example, but yeah.
So how do you plan on utilizing that in your life? Are you going to cut somebody's apple in front of them, or what? How are you going to incorporate it into your life?
Great question. So I'm not as ballsy as he was, and I don't have enough social capital to do that. But I will tell you, when I read this book, one of the things I started to do, just like little micro changes in my life. I work at Bubs on the weekends, right? I'm serving customers. In the past, as soon as my table would get there, I would run up to the table and be like, "Oh my God, hey guys, thanks so much for waiting. I really appreciate your patience. What can I get for you today?" Basically making it so that I am their slave, if you will. And now I am a server. The whole purpose is to serve my customers. But reading this book, I was like, let me change my mentality. Let me try something out. Let me own the show. Because at the end of the day, this is my show. These are customers I'm servicing. But if I could practice taking the power and then redistributing it, I might have a little bit better of a chance when I get into the bigger business world. And so in the past, like I said, I would be really like on it. But now, because I read this book and I want to apply some of these principles, I try to use the principles of the frame. So instead of being their slave, now I make it very clear to them. Without saying it, I make it clear, like, this is my show. I'm going to run it how I want to run it. You're paying my bills kind of thing, not I'm relying on you to pay my bill. No, you're paying my bill, right? So one of my favorite ways to use some of that now is to ice my tables. In the past, I'd be right on it, like, "Oh, I'm going out there as soon as I can." But now, anytime I get a table, I'll wait a minute or two before I even greet them. And I know they're looking around like, "Where's our server?" Like, "Oh my gosh." But I'll purposely wait. And I don't know if it's helping me so far. I don't know if it's making it worse for me or whatnot. But anytime like my fellow servers like, "Yo, dude, like, why your table? They're waiting on you." I'm like, "I know, they can wait. They can wait. Little patience goes a long way." I always tell them? They're going to be hungrier. They're going to be ready to, drink. Who's winning there? Me, because they're ready to go. And now, if they want to get upset or don't have patience, again, I take that power frame and I use it to my advantage. So, instead of maybe going out there and giving them the drink as fast as I can, if they're being a little snarky or rude, they can wait a little longer, right? Now, sure, that might cut into my tips, but again, for me, it's the concept of I'm using the power I have, even though they're technically paying my bills. I'm using the power I have to show them, like, it's my show. Like, you want to go good or not? You want to be nice? Look, we're going to have a great time. You want to be rude? Well, I can be rude too. Now, of course, I'm not saying that to the customers, but that's kind of how I've used some of the principles from the book to try to establish some, some social, more power frames, if you will. I keep mentioning these frames. Let me actually look at one to give a better example.
You mentioned that situation you were just talking about, and so how empowering was that when you were able to like flip the script, the power dynamic?
I would say, you say how empowering that was?
Yeah, like how did it feel? Like what were you feeling?
I'd say maybe for me, the empowering isn't the right term, but I will say that 100% it has helped me to be less stressed at work. Because now instead of me like, "Oh my God, I'm caught up on, I can't give them great service." Now I'm going into work like, I'm going to give them great service as much as I can. But at the end of the day, they're my customers. They came to our restaurant. They're not like, don't let them run our show. That's what I tell my fellow servers now. Like, look, this is our show. You got to put your foot down, because the moment we give up control, at least in my opinion, the moment we give up control, that sign of weakness, that sign of we are not actually in charge here. To me, that's when you get a lower tip, because they're not going to respect you. They're just going to be like, yeah, do this for us, do that, do this, get us that, and here's your $2 tip. Versus like, oh shit, like, this guy, don't mess with him. He runs the show here. Like, he's the hot shot here. And we like that. I don't know the psychology behind humans, but like, I think my new way of serving, customers like it more, even if they don't say it, right? It's just more confident. There's a good word. It's more confident. It's more demanding. It's more in terms of like presence. I'm there, even though I was there already. Now it's just a different ballgame. So that's how my experience has been so far since using it. And so one of these frames here I'd like to talk about, if that's all right with you, JP.
Go for it.
Let's see. I'll talk about the time frame. There's lots of frames in here, but I think more relevant ones are time frames. And so in the book, he talks about in any time they had a meeting, when a client or future prospect or customer would tell him something like, hey, we only have 15 minutes. He said, that's fine. I only have 10 minutes anyways. and he talks about in the book, he says, and if they tell you back, oh, well, we only have 7 minutes, then you go, that's fine. I only have 5. Basically to establish like, look, this is my show. I'm going to do it on my time. It's like, even though it's really theirs, he's making it like, it's my time. And actually I'm more important than you. I have a lot more meetings than just you. And that creates the, oh, dang, like actually we might need him to be around. And the best example of this in the book, he talks about, he would go through meetings, pitch meetings. And if he was cut short for time, he would cut it down more. So if they're like, hey, you have 15 minutes, he would go, great, I only have 10. He said he'd do it in like 7 minutes. He'd wrap it up and tell him like, I've got to go to my next meeting. You know where to find me if you want. And he's like, he talks about in the book how people would stop him like, well, wait, no, like we want to know more. Versus in the past where they would take up all the time they could trying to get across all the great points, and people would just be like, whatever. And so I forget the psychology behind it, but it's so interesting how when you establish these type of frames, like you're like, I only have 10 minutes. Now they're kind of more like, whoa, we don't want to miss out on something good. So maybe we should keep him around. Maybe we should get on board with what he's pitching to us, kind of thing.
It's almost a scarcity. It's almost a scarcity thing.
That was a great point, yeah.
Because, like when you see like an advertising say there's only 10 left, like, you're like, oh, I got to get in on that. I got to be one of the people, like there's 10 left, 9 left, 8 left,
yeah.
like the countdown. And it makes people want to, jump to the product or jump to the person or, jump to the sale, I think a lot quicker. I think that's a good point there. Is there anything else you want to, any other lessons you've learned from the book?
Yeah, I thought of one just now and sharing that with you. There's another one where this one would be relevant for like job seekers and people who are graduating and going into salary negotiations, people who are looking to switch careers and need to get more money, people who don't necessarily recognize their value. This is a great one. I don't know what frame this would lie in. I think the power frame is best, but reading the book has helped me to realize too, you know what? 9 times out of 10, they need you more than you need them. For example, when you apply for a job and they reply back to you and ask you to interview with them, instantly you should know they need me more than I need them. That's the truth. And so you have that leverage because there's thousands of jobs out there. They're not always pretty, but there's plenty of them, right? And so you know that going into the interview. So when you say, hey, I want 38,000 plus a year, I'm sure people will make more than me going out of college. But they tell you no, because this has happened to me already a lot. They tell you no. I think most of us would have resorted to, well, I'll take what I can get. This is the best I can get. Instead, we should move into it knowing, you know what, this company's hiring me for a reason. There's a reason why nobody has taken this position. There's a reason why they need me. So they need me more than I need them, and I have the power there, right? You have the control. So in that, I want to share this because I think it's much more powerful mentality going to things like knowing this so that you can say, you know what, this is a great job. Thank you for the offer. I would have loved to work here, but I made it very clear this is what I want and need, and you want to give me less than that, I got to walk away. Now, I know it's easier said than done, but knowing that little bit right there, that power frame of they need me more than I need them, because that's the truth. Those companies don't exist without us, right? I think that would just help change people's games 10 times, 10x, as Grant Cardone would say.
I think it's an interesting point because, you know, I'm actually in, you know, both positions right now. I actually have 200 applications that I'm looking over for JP Fit for Life interns. And, you know, I'm also looking for a job as well. So I think that, you know, I'm in both positions, so I can kind of see what you're saying there about, you know, how you have to be able to be in that power dynamic. And yeah, if a company doesn't want to work with you, I don't want to work with a company that doesn't want to work with me. And that's another thing there. You know, you want to be mutually, you want to be appreciated. And if they're not giving you the money, they obviously aren't appreciating you, because, you know, your time is valuable. And that's, you know, that's what makes you the money when you're working in the position. So they're not valuing you if they're not paying you the right amount.
Absolutely, JP. So I know we're about to wrap up here. And just before we do, I want to share, you know, the type of people that should read this book. I think that will be another good little snippet of content to share with others. So the type of people that should read this book called Pitch Anything. I would say if you want to go in investment banking, read this book. Even if you don't want to be the pitch man, if you just want to be the number cruncher, the data analyst, still read this book. If you want to go into a career where you want to earn more money right out of college, read this book. If you are fundraising for your club, if you're fundraising for your nonprofit or the future company you work for, read this book. If you are just somebody in sales who is maybe not working with high ticket items, but you just want to be able to sell more, read this book. If you're waiting tables at a restaurant like I do every weekend, and you want to show customers who's really boss, you want to earn more money that way, read this book. So those are the type of people that I think should read this book and would benefit the most from reading Pitch Anything. Is really anybody who's in a position to where they want to learn how to better persuade others and better command control of any situation, whether you're talking to the CEO or the freaking, you know, McDonald's worker. Not to knock on anybody's status in society, but let's be honest, let's call it like it is. Their status is everywhere, you know. So that's what I would like to share, my last tidbit.
I'm going to add it to my list. I can tell you that.
Heck yeah, JP.
Pitch Anything by Warren. Write it down right now. I listen to audiobooks, and I do my book. I got my book now. Let's see. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
So should we cut this video?
Hi guys, it's JP from JP Fit for Life, and we're back and we're talking about my book that I read, and Dom's going to be doing the interviewing this time around. We're talking about how to win friends and influence people, and I'm excited to let's get started here. Awesome,
JP. Thanks for letting me take control here. Now I have the power for it. No, I'm teasing.
No.
So, JP, I want to ask, just like you asked me, when did you start reading?
When did I start reading? So I would say I really started getting into reading with my mentor, and he really pushed me. We connected about a year ago, and in the last year I've really picked up on my reading and learning. I mean, I've done reading throughout the course of school, and it really wasn't the type of reading that I am doing now, because for the first time in my life I'm not in college, so I have the choice to read whatever I want. You know, there was textbooks required, and some of them were all right, and you know, there was some interesting information in there. But once I got out of school, and my mentor really pushed me in my last year at university to always be reading and always be learning as much as possible and staying informed on topics. So he started recommending me books, and they were just incredible books. And he just still does it to this day. And we always talk about them. We always get on a phone call, and we'll talk about, you know, what I learned from it. And he'll talk about what his insights on the book were. So we really go back and forth, and it's just a friendly conversation. So he really motivated me to start reading, and I've loved it ever since.
That's awesome, JP. So in that, you even answered the next question. What is your process for picking books? So it seems like you've got someone who makes that much easier for you, because like, hey, JP, we read a book this month. We caught up about that. Here's the next book you should read based off of my experience or interest. So I love that. This is a bit off of topic here, but I know people are probably interested in hearing about how you found a mentor who's willing to spend time with you and who's willing to share with you insights from their life, because obviously they're older, so that you can be successful in yours. I know someone might be thinking like, how do I find a mentor like that?
I definitely think it's, it's about connecting and using, like, LinkedIn is a great platform, but I actually connected with my mentor through an IU media connection website where we connect with different alums from the IU media school. And I had to reach out to them, and I had to create that spark because obviously, he had no idea who I was. So you have to, and that first phone call was very, it was very scary. This guy's an 80-year-old giant in the media world. He interviewed some of the greatest leaders in the last 60 years. And, it's pretty intimidating when you go on a phone call with him. I let him talk most of the time. I just try to absorb what he's saying. But, I'm always ready for when he asks me a question. That's always the toughest part because I want to be on my best, and I want to come up to his game because he's done everything that I could ever imagine doing and would want to do. So he's already been there and done that. So I'm listening. My ears are perked up. I'm listening to what he's saying, and I'm writing notes, and I'm coming to meetings with notes. So it's just requiring me to level up constantly. And that's why I continue to connect with them, really. And then if someone was asking me how to get someone like that, I think that LinkedIn is probably a good way as well to do it. I think that, like, you and I have created great connections off LinkedIn. And it's a pretty easy, threshold for messaging people. It's not like, there's not a lot of, like, the IU one is through the university. So obviously you'd have to go to IU for that. But LinkedIn wouldn't require that at all. You can message anyone and be like, hey, can I sit down for a phone call and learn? And I think a lot of people would be open to, talking about themselves because, that's part of how to win friends and influence people is by, having people talk about themselves and ask questions and be really, interested in what they're saying.
Well said there, JP. You know what? You beat me to the punch again. I was literally going to talk about, hey, if anybody who, catches on, you just mentioned one of the principles from the book and how you first met your mentor, and you just said it. You let him do a lot of talking, but I won't steal the thunder in that there. So let's get into the book now. The book you read, or we'll be talking about, How to Win Friends and Influence People. So knowing you, I don't necessarily think you have a hard time doing that. You're similar to me. We're very social creatures. We like making people feel welcome. I think we're not everybody likes us, but for the most part, we're the Walmart greeters. You walk in the room, we're going to be like, hey, how you doing? What's your name? What brings you here? Compared to others who might just kind of sit in the background. Not that that's wrong. So I want to ask you, JP, why did you choose to read this book out of all of them, outside of the fact that your mentor might have recommended it, because it seems like you don't need this book. So why did you choose to read it?
So actually, the funny thing is, this is one of the ones I chose on my own. My mentor usually recommends more political books because he did a lot of political interviews in the last 60 years. So I kind of do more of my sales. Like, I want to pitch anything, because I want to do sales as well, So that'll be kind of a different than a political book because there are differences between political books and these more sales. And I've also read Marketing Made Simple, which is one I chose on my own, which is a sales one and advertising and marketing. But I chose this one. I just wanted to, make sure I was doing everything I possibly could. I knew that I was taking steps in the right direction, and I didn't want to get too ahead of myself. And I always know that there's room to grow. And, I think that there's situations where you can feel more empowered in, like, so, for example, last year in Toastmasters, I felt, I was one of the oldest in the room, and I was, I felt confident. I felt like I'd been there before, but now I'm out in the real world. And, I graduated from school and I knew I had to level up because I'm now the youngest. That power shift, like you said, you go through college and you gain that confidence. Freshman year, you feel like you don't fit in. And sophomore year, a little bit more, junior year, senior year. And then it's like, okay, now you got to move on to the next thing. Now you're at the bottom of the food chain. And then you got to, learn everything else, how to interact with people. And that's actually, starting in my job in retail right now, I'm dealing with a lot of people that don't speak English very well. And that's a challenge in itself. And I know a little bit of Spanish, but I wouldn't call it enough. But I think that, always learning people and always trying not to be settled, even if you are at a good level already. And that's what I try to strive to do. And that's why I picked out this book.
Fantastic, JP. I love to hear that. Well, one, you made this choice on your own, which not to say you wouldn't have done it, but that says a lot more about a person when they choose to do something on their own and actually take action to do it. And then two, I think it'll be interesting to hear maybe down the line of the video your interactions with using the principles from the book with people who can't quite always use those principles because they don't literally understand you. It's not the same.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move into what are, if not choose one or choose a few of the principles from the book that were your favorite and why.
So I think probably my favorite ones are probably the ones I struggled with the most. I think that I knew that there was some that I was like kind of giving myself a rating on when I was going through the book, and I was looking at, okay, I'm proficient in this level, but it could be better. And then there was some areas where like I could be a lot better. One of the big ones was remember their name. This is one I've kind of struggled with recently. I feel like, when we go through school, there's like all those games that we play to get to know people's names or something. And there's none of that in the real world. So, you have to like try to always, like when you're like shaking hands, well, now with COVID, we can't really shake hands anymore. But when you connect with someone, it's just like you have to, remember their name and remember, if you meet a lot of different people and, I can remember things about people, but remembering people's names is something, I don't know why it's escaped my mind, but the importance of it really was dawned on me in this book. And I've tried to, prioritize it and make notes when I have to, if I write down someone's name just to be extra sure that I got it. And I think that when I think about it, all these things I learned and all these lessons are things that I want people to do for me. So that's why none of them really shocked me, but let's see what else. So remember their name was a big one for me.
So real quick, before we move on to the next one, because I know you have the principles listed, so you won't forget those, but maybe you can share with us, now that you've read the book and even beforehand, what you do to remember names now that you know, like, okay, I've really got to focus more on that. What have you seen works to help remember somebody's name? Because I'm like you, I'll easily forget a name and I'll be mean and joke like, hey, you just weren't important enough. But obviously you don't want to tell people that, that's rude. So what works in helping you to remember people's names?
I would just say probably, writing it down and making notes about people. Sometimes I think that could be a good helpful step, and either on your phone or written in person or written on paper. I think that's a good way to remember it. And just trying to create, that connection, like create kind of a story about the person as well. You kind of have a name and you have a little bit of a kind of a bio, like imaginary, maybe a social media profile for someone that doesn't have social media, which, I mean, you could also use social media as well. That's also another way to learn people's names if you forget. But yeah, just trying to be more attentive and like trying to listen, in that first conversation, because after the first, it's like it gets more awkward if you don't ask for their name. It's like it's a slippery slope that like what do I do now? It's like, do I ask for their name again? Or
so I love how you shared that, kind of making, or honestly knowing their story, which I think if you're good at communicating in general and maybe trying to get to know somebody, understand them, you'll get to know their story.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you mentioned knowing it, and heck, maybe even repeating it to that person so they know you're on the same page. Great, that's just a basic sales tactic there. And so when you shared that, though, something came to mind. Let's say you do forget somebody's name and you see them again. What do you do? How do you save face but still get their name out of them? I've got some ideas myself. I'm curious to know what you've done in the past, or what do you think would work? Let's put you on the spot.
I mean, you could politely ask again. I think that's also, a reasonable, it depends, we talked about how, like, if we didn't know, how long it's been since we talked to them last, or, it's been a while. I think that it's, you have to kind of maybe politely just ask. I mean, there's other ways you can do it. I mean, that's a tough slope. What's your idea?
So my idea, at least the one I always try to use first, is, what's your last name again? Normally, if they don't just say their last name, they'll go blank, blank, first, last. Or they might catch on like, oh, you forgot my name. Then you can make it a fun game, right? Or like you said, you can just be outright honest with them, like, look, I've got horrible memory. Put the blame on you. That's perfect. It's like self-deprecating humor. It's always funny. It's always like, good, nice. An unorthodox way that I've done this a lot as a server, especially because you run into people with familiar faces, but you don't remember their names, but you go to school with them. I'll literally like run up or run somewhere like behind the scenes, go on Instagram and like type in like something close to their name, and I'm like, oh yeah, there they are, and I'll click on it like Max Johnson. I'll be like, hey Max, how you doing, man? Like, no, I didn't forget you at all. That's kind of how I do it there. Or if you're really sneaky and for some reason people have their IDs or wallets out, you notice girls always have like little pouches when you're like walking around and, you know, working the table, or if you're just talking to the group of friends, you know, make those glances, especially because you're on campus a lot. Well, if you're a college student, people have their phones with their little names on the back. Freaking be attentive. Look at that name, like, oh, it says Jessica, or like look at their something to give away what their name is, right? That way, if you don't feel comfortable asking, you can boom, there you go. Or you can pop a sneak to your friends like, hey, what's her name again? Boom, there you go. Those are my ideas. But anyhow, let's move on to another principle of yours, because I know you're about to share more with us.
That's incredible attention to detail, though, like you said.
Yes, I know, kind of stalkerish.
Yeah, and I think that coming back to remembering people's name is making people feel important. And I think I've done this better with like listening to people's stories and, you know, coming back with feedback. And the big thing that I got from this book was listen, listen, listen. And that's the major area that I've made a switch, you know, like I said, with listening to my mentor, you know, when he talks, I'm going to listen. Like, I'm not going to try and talk over him. He probably talks for 3/4 of our conversations. Right. And I give about 25%. So I'm always, you know, listening. And I've always, you know, and I've tried doing that with, you know, even like a mentee of mine, you know, someone that's even like below me or younger than me that's trying to learn from me. I listen to them and I try to hear their problems as well. And, you know, I try to provide, you know, good advice and good solutions through, you know, what I've learned so far. So I talk less and I let them talk more. So I'm always trying to absorb more information. I've made more of an effort to do that. And I mean, there are, you know, some conversations like, you know, my parents will do most of the listening when I talk to my parents because, you know, they're my parents and they're always looking out for me. But I'm always trying to listen. Even when I'm in retail, you know, I'll ask how someone's day is going. I'll actually ask how someone's day is going. And, you know, I'll try to listen and talk about, you know, how their day is going and what they're going to do next. And just kind of, you know, really make it seem like their day is important. And, you know, just kind of see, like, I actually see you. You're not just, you're just not someone in retail. Like, I actually see you and you as a person, and I listen to what they're doing and what they've done. So that's what I've really tried to flip the script on.
I love that. Now, I think this is not everybody, but for me, a common battle I have is what's the difference between, you know, listening to listen and listening so that you can let the other person know they're being heard. And I say this because anybody can listen. I could sit here all night and listen to you, but I could just leave it at that. And then I could listen so that you're being heard, and, you know, I can not regurgitate what you just said, but repeat it in the ways that you know, taught it or told it to me, to your satisfaction, so that, you know, like, yeah, he's listening, he gets it. Have you ever experienced anything like that in your experience with interacting with others, you know? Or maybe even you yourself have run into listening to just listen, kind of like, yeah, hurry up, get out of here, versus listening to actually let someone know they're being heard.
What is the question?
Have you had any experiences where you or someone else was just listening to listen versus listening so that you or someone else could be heard? Yeah. And how do you handle that?
Yeah, I think that, you know, I've tried to, you know, create my circle of people as people that, you know, actually care about me. So I try not to, you know, be around too many people that aren't like listening to me. I think that, you know, that listening is a good way of, you know, actually listening. You can tell if someone, because if you ask them a question, they should be able to answer it. You know, if they should be able to. Listening isn't completely you listen 100% of the time, right? You just know when to come in with relevant details or relevant information, and kind of, you know, just create a kind of a little bit of a back and forth to keep it, you know, still pretty natural. Make sure you're still engaged. So you should, you know, be listening to actively listen, and, you know, forming opinions or forming information and forming ideas off of what they're saying. And I think that, you know, if you kind of can be like, if they're looking for advice, you know, it could be like, one solution is this or one solution is that. You can go two different ways, and you can, like, if someone's talking to you about a problem, you're actively listening, and you're basically trying to see what they want why do they want you to listen? What is the reason? Do they want you to give advice, or do they just want you to listen? Like just take in the information, because it depends. All depends on the situation, and all depends on the conversation, really.
Well said, JP. As always, I like that you talk about how it all depends on the situation, because it really does. Especially when you get into the work world, which I'm assuming most people watching this will be. You gotta know when to listen to the customer to let them be heard, right? Versus listening to a customer so that they can just get it out and you can go back to doing your job. Because even I experience this, and I'm wondering if you do too, where you kind of have to allocate your time wisely, and you don't want to get caught up with the wrong customer who really they're not talking about much of anything. They're just rambling, and you don't say it to them, but you're like, all right, boom. Whereas there's a different customer who's probably going to buy more, who probably has more trust and rapport built with the organization, so that you are actually listening, so that they can be heard, so that they continue to be that long-term customer. So I love that you say that it depends on the situation there. Next question, what type of person should read this book? Now that you've read it, what type of person would you recommend read it?
Anyone that wants to get better in human interactions. And this could just be anybody that wants to learn. I think it's definitely, there's a lot of good sales tactics in here. I think that you could use to implement those, and it's just basically just life in general. If you want to have better friendships, if you want to have better relationships, if you want to have better connections with mentors, family, just anybody in general, I think it's a good start. And I think it's a very universal book. I don't think that anyone could really read that book. And I mean, Pitch Anything is obviously probably mostly a sales dominant book. And How to Win Friends and Influence People, I mean, that's kind of that could be used, and it's all about persuasion. It could be used in any sort of field of that matter, or just life in general.
Yeah, wonderful. JP, I want to know if anything in the book you read you did not agree with, because this is one of those books that's like the holy grail of everyone should read this book in their whole life. So is there anything in that book that you did not agree with? And maybe not 100%, but in terms of practicality, because of course the book was written decades ago. So maybe something you read, you're like, I don't know if this would necessarily work in today's society. If you can't think of anything, I think from based off my memory in the book, was there something where they talked about avoiding arguments, basically?
Yeah. So one of the, let's see, don't try to win an argument. No one wins in an argument. That was the basic principle around that.
I like that.
I think you can have an argument. I think it's it's all right to have a decent argument. I wouldn't say you shouldn't let the argument consume everything. Like if you argue in a friendship,
right?
It can be healthy. And I mean, I'm not going to say you should never argue, but I mean, it's probably a good thing to refrain from it mostly. Maybe every once in a while, sometimes arguments are a lot of times to blow off like steam. Like, people are mad already. And
so true.
There's definitely different ways to, do that as well.
So true. I deal with that all the time when I call a customer and they're like, I told you to stop calling me. And I'm like, I bet you feel real good yelling at somebody over the phone.
And I've got that on telemarketing too. And I try to, come at it with just compassion, because if they're going through something, it's obviously, if you're calling someone, you don't know what's going on in their lives. Like, I mean, maybe you have a little bit of information, like if you're doing a sales call, I'm sure you have your background information that can help. But I think you have to just look at it from compassion and try to be, okay, well, this obviously isn't going to work out. And you just hang up and you try to move on to the next, because you can't really focus on the negative of that argument. It's only going to consume you, and you just got to go on to the next one, really.
Right. Wonderful. What else do you have for us to share about the book?
Let's see if there's any other. There was the one about do not criticize, condemn, or complain.
It's a great one to talk about.
I think that's a good one. And I think that, criticism is, I've always tried to listen to constructive criticism, and I try to give constructive criticism for interns that work for me as well. So I'm always trying to, have them level up. So I think that criticism can be done in a good way. And I think, yeah, the useless criticism it's like, someone says you suck or nobody cares that you're talking about something, that's just not going to help anyone in any way. So I think that, yeah, that you can have, motivational criticism. And I think that can, push you to the next level. And you've given me feedback before on some of my stuff. So definitely can help push it to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, complaining and condemning, as long as there's no room for that complaining. I mean, it's not like it's going to get you anywhere. It's not going to move you forward. And most of the time, the people that are constantly working don't really have time to complain about like other people and, hate on other people, like I was saying. So it's like you have to be so focused on, what you're trying to do that you don't have time for all the other nonsense. It's just going to detract from your goals, really.
So JP, maybe you could go a little more in depth on what the book or what Dale wrote about, or really his ghostwriter wrote about, in terms of not complaining, condemning, or criticizing. Now, what did the book talk about? How you could not do that, or why you shouldn't do that, outside of what you just explained to us?
Yeah, I think that it was. I'm trying to remember what it said exactly. I'm just going at someone with anger. I think that was one of the main pictures that was painted. I think that, it's never a good way to approach someone in general. And I don't think that it was in the book either, but I don't remember any specific situations, unfortunately.
That's perfectly fine. I got another great question for you.
Okay.
This might be our last one to wrap things up. What would you tell someone to expect from reading this book?
What would I tell someone to expect to get from this book?
Yeah.
It's an interesting one.
And I guess another thought that came to mind for me, if I saw someone talking about this book, I'd be like, okay, is that going to give me a high level overview, or are they going to go in depth with how I can actually do these things? Because oftentimes books will be like, you can be a millionaire, and then you open it and it just says, believe in yourself, you can be a millionaire, the end. Whereas other books go in depth, like, here's the system, here's the process, here's what you need to do, here's what you can do. What kind of book is this one?
So I'd say that it is kind of dispersed out over 10 different type of, things that are going to help you. And I think that you could have a book on each of them in reality. So you could have a book on do not criticize, condemn, and complain, and that could be a book on its own. So there could be 10 books inside of this book. Obviously, it's a good start, and it's a good overview of everything. But I think that, to really get that full picture on each of them, you'd have to have a book on each. There were situations and different types of people and different conversations that really helped paint the picture, but it could have been painted better. So I think that you'd have to have a book on each of them to get the real full picture.
Wonderful. And I decided, here's the last question, JP. Should people who are like me, who are like you, who already have a natural ability to interact and socialize and woo others and to get the room going and to work the crowd, should people like us, should they still read this book, even if they feel like, I already know everything about it, I don't have to?
I would say you definitely still have to read this book, because I think that anyone like us is very, humble. I think that, we're humble with how young we are. And I think that we're always trying to learn more. So I think that I picked up some new things from this book. And I think that you might not see it in somebody might get a couple different things. Like they might be proficient in different areas. So that's also another value that they get from this book. And I mean, you could also learn from the situations more in depth. And you could also just take away different pieces of information. But yeah, if you're really trying to grow, and you might want to read it more than once. What's stopping you from reading it more than once if it's a really good book, which it is, for the overview of all of these 10 ways to get better with people. But I think that, I think you should, if you're never settled, you should read it.
Mm-hmm. I love that. For me, what stuck out the most in your response to my question there, if people like us who already kind of have the book, we live out the book, we just might not have read it, should read it, say yes. What I love is that you mentioned basically, regardless of, you know, who you are, where you're at in life, your status, your intelligence, yada, yada, your skill set, you're going to be able to pull something from it. And I love that. One of my favorite quotes that I live by every day is by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Each man is of my superior, and in that I learned something from him, or I learned from him. And that's basically what you said in your response there. No matter if you can do everything in the book, there's still going to be some insight you can glean from that by being humble, giving up that control of, oh, I can do everything, and being willing to say, let's see what else I can learn from this, or what could I kind of refine in my own skill set and abilities. So I love that. Well said, JP.
And I think, yeah, you can learn, you know, you can learn from a certain situation in the book, and you can just like, if you have that situation in the future, you might not have run into it before, but then you're that much more ready. Well, that is all I have to say on how to win friends and influence people. Thank you, Dom, for interviewing me on that.
Absolutely, JP. As always, thanks for inviting me to come chat with you, man. I love that we can have these little fireside chats without the fire, without the s'mores and whatnot, without the bugs eating us up. Always glad to be here and share our growing wisdom with others. Hopefully they learn something from it, just like we learn from them.
It's always great chatting with you, and your insights are always great. And thank you for coming on. And thanks for everyone for tuning in, and have a wonderful night.